Okay, so as we continue on in our test and troubleshooting section 3, we're talking about analyze the system log data and statistics. Okay, so we're on Objective 303 and broken this out into 3 parts. So start out by talking about the status of pools based on logs, statistical query response times, and then the zone transfer log. Alright, so if we review our DNS exam blueprint, Objective 303 states to analyze system log data and statistics for problem analysis. Some examples are verify the status of pools based on relevant log entries, analyze statistical data to pinpoint any issues regarding query response times, and then analyze appropriate log for proper zone transfer operation. Okay, so how can you verify the status of GTM pools? Well, you can look in the logs, and one important place you can do that is going to DNS GSLB pools, then statistics in the GUI. You can also look at the TMSH command, the show GTM pool, and then specify the pool name. If you want to dig down deep into what members are specifically getting certain traffic, you can do the TMSH show GTM pool members command. So the varlog GTM is going to indicate the messages for marking all members as up or down. So in this case, we're looking at a state change from green to red and then from red to green via the pool. This might indicate a flapping issue, or maybe you're taking those pool members offline, so you're marking them as disabled. All right, the next one shows a green to red, red to green, and this one indicates we have no route for this specific pool member. So it lists the pool name and then the member and the member IP. In this case, it was 10.1.1.1 on port 80. So that is our member IP and port. Okay, and here are some helpful commands to filter on the varlog GTM. In this case, we're using a cat varlog GTM, and we're grepping for greater than red, and this will show you any objects moving from a green to red state, so you can see what's happening a little easier if there's issues. Okay, and next we can, if you want to sort for a large number of pool members that are being marked down or are bouncing, you can sort the results by IP address using the following command. So in this case, we're doing a cat for the GTM log, grepping -w, so we're matching the whole word exactly. So instead of matching on members, we're going to match on just member singular, and then we're sorting that content based on the IP address. Okay, so let's jump into statistical logging using TMSH, and we're using AVR really as the module to collect this information and make sense of it via a sampling rate. So AVR is the application visibility and reporting module, and we have to make sure it is provisioned on the same big IP DNS platform that DNS is running. AVR is used to collect DNS statistics on a sampling rate that is on the same big IP DNS platform. We can use this information to manage the DNS traffic on the network to help identify certain traffic patterns. So before we dive in too deep, I wanted to show you an example. Okay, so AVR is enabled under the DNS profile. So if we go to DNS delivery profiles and DNS, and we click on our specific DNS profile, DNS profile down here is enabled for AVR statistics sample rate. Now 1 is getting a sample of statistic information, and if we go down to 1, it means that every query will be sent to the AVR database. If you specify 0, no queries will be sent, and if you specify 10, 1 out of every 10 queries will be sent to the AVR statistics. So if you have a lot of queries coming in, and it's maybe best to increase that sampling rate just to not overwhelm the AVR module for the stats, right? So the DNS profile is attached to a listener. So if we go to our UDP listener, DNS profile is on that. So if we're ever doing queries to this specific listener address, then that sample rate will take that and identify certain queries for our sampling. So you can also look at the AVR graph data via the GUI, or you can run specific TMSH commands to look at this data. Alright, so we can do things like identify the 3 most common query names, query types, the 3 client IP addresses from the most DNS query, where the most DNS queries originate, 3 common query names for A records. Here we're displaying specifically for F5.com the most common query types, and then this last one is the 3 most common client IP addresses requesting query type A records. So there's many different ways to drill down and identify this information quickly using the AVR module. Instead of doing a show GTM profile and looking at all the profile data, you really get a good sense of exactly what you want to see at the sampling rate you want to see it at. Okay, so here is statistical logging based on the version 13 AVR. And the AVR stats for version 13 include application, virtual server, query name, query type, client IP, and we can also filter the statistics based on time period. Okay, so here we have an example from our version 13 client. Do a show analytics DNS report, view by query type, and the publishing interval is by default 5 minutes, and it's reported over a 1 hour period. Okay, so we have 9:57 to 10:57, but it is also published within 5 minutes. So we have to make sure to wait a little bit if we just run a few queries and give it at least 5 minutes based on its publishing interval. So we can see the 3 most common query types: any, A, and MX, and how many packets were associated with each query type. Okay, and using the GUI based on statistical logging, we can look for domain names associated with the AVR collection. So if we go to Statistics, Analytics, and DNS in the GUI, we can right away see our most used domain names. So in this case, app1 is the most used based out of our full list, getting a total of 48 packets within that specific interval. Okay, and we can also select based on query types in the GUI, view by query types, this drop down here, and we can see how many any query types we've got, A, MX, and the overall. Of course, this includes, we obviously see any other DNS query type in this list as well. Okay, and say we liked this specific graph and wanted to send it off to our engineering team or the rest of our infrastructure team, we can create a report of this AVR graph by going to, we can choose the export options, PDF, choose it to save that report locally or report that file via email as an attachment. Also, you can, in addition to PDF, we can do a CSV, time series and details table. And then this is what it will look like. We just ran this report on that previous graph, and you can see it looks very similar to what it showed on the screenshot. It's formatted very cleanly, and if you're doing a bunch of export options, it would all fit into one DNS report. So it allows you to take all the information you spotted in the AVR, collect it, and have a nice detailed DNS report. Okay, so let's test a little bit. If we do a dig to our DNS listener right here and go to a specific wide IP. Let's say we want to do MX, and I'm just going to do this. We'll just do it 5 times. And I don't have any MX records set up for that, so it gives us our, by default, it gives the start of authority in this section without responding to the MX. So we'll just do that a total of 5 times, so 3, 4, 5, and we'll do 5A records, and about CNAME 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so now we have to wait based on our publishing interval. The default publishing interval is 5 minutes. So if we go to Statistics, Analytics, DNS, okay, it's going to collect this information. We do the default device group, and then we can specify either domain names or query types specifically related to DNS. Okay, so let's just click domain names, and we're still waiting to get that information. I'll pause the video. Okay, so now we got the data that we need. It took about 2-3 minutes to populate. We can see we're specifying domain names and packets per domain name. app1.domain.com. It's got 16 packets. And to look at the query types, we can drop down and look at query types. Okay, so I got close to 5. I got 1 extra A record in there, but you can see our breakdown here. A, CNAME, and MX, and then you can go to export this PDF. Before we do that, we can also go to, if we have a much bigger graph, we can choose to select certain clients, the query types by name. So let's say we wanted to just look at the A records. We can update this list and run that same report. And so there's many different options you can choose. You know, obviously if you have a lot of data, and our sampling rate was a 1-to-1, so every packet is going to go to the analytics module. And to check whether that is provisioned on your Big IP DNS platform, go to the system resource provisioning, and you can go down to AVR, and you should have it licensed and then set to nominal. This will require a restart of services after you submit, so make sure to do that during a maintenance window. Okay, so we touched on this a little bit in our previous video, but when we're talking about global statistic logging, that is the non-GSLB features. And to view this, we can go to the Analytics Statistics, Module Statistics, DNS, and Delivery, and then choose our DNS profile that is tied to our listener. The global statistics includes a lot of information. So we have information about just general DNS traffic processing on the platform, queries and responses, the number of wide IP requests, cache requests, etc. And we looked at that detailed TMSH output in the previous video. Okay, statistical query response times global relates to, and this is probably a specific place where you're not going to find this specific information really anywhere else. It's under statistics, performance, and then DNS. So we can see on the entire box what the GTM is processing for requests and GTM resolutions. So you can see the overall performance of the device there and what it's handling for all of its listeners and wide IPs. And to get that same information via the command line, the same information from the last slide via the command line, it's a little tricky. In this case, we have to use SNMP walk and point to the community of public for using that community and the version of SNMP, then the box that we're trying to walk to, in this case our loopback, and then the OID. And then we can grep for the specific IP address and then the connections per second. It's a longer way to do it, but then based on our local MIB file, we You can use that to identify how many queries are based on that listener address, which is 10.0.1.100. Okay, to see that same information on the previous slide from the GUI via the command line, we can use SNMP walk to collect information about our listener, our global listener. Okay, so we're specifying SNMP walk and then the community public. The version is SNMP version 2C, to our agent, which is the local loopback, and then the F5 default OID. We're grepping for the listener and then the specific message related to that MIB in the F5 Big IP local MIB file. Okay, long-winded way to do it. It may be easier to look in the GUI or even on your SNMP manager that is used to send this information is going to be maybe a lot cleaner. Okay, so in this case it's 0, but I wanted to show you the command to query that via global. Okay, so for the last topic in this video, we'll talk about the zone transfer log. There's a really nice debug you can use at the command line to enable the debug level log for zone transfer specifically, and then you can tail the LTM log to get that information. You can also use the TMSH command based on that particular zone to get additional information. And you should note that the default refresh interval for F5 to receive zone updates from the master name server is 3 hours, or 10800 seconds. And you can set this lower for troubleshooting or maybe lab purposes, something like 60 seconds. So the changes you make to the master name server will be quickly added to F5 by the zone transfer request from F5. Alright, so we've enabled that debug. Now we're looking at the LTM log. Here you can see it's scheduling the zone transfer in the 60 seconds. This is the start for the specific zone from this IP of the GTM. It's checks its availability status for that zone. It changes from yellow to green, and if it made updates to that zone, it will increment the serial number based on that zone, and that's allowing the F5 to verify that the zone transfer has completed successfully for that zone. And we'll reset the transfer state and then schedule a new zone transfer based on our refresh interval of 60 seconds. Okay, so that wraps up this video talking about analyzing system log data and statistics. In specific, we talked about the status of pools based on logs, statistical query response times, and then finished up by talking about the zone transfer log. Okay, so next up in Objective 304, we're addressing DNS issues based on troubleshooting. So I'll see you in the next one.